I had always imagined that the happiest day of my life would be the day my daughter got married. She had been my world ever since the day she was born. I worked tirelessly to provide for her, making sure she had everything she needed. My life was always about her, but as I stood there watching her, radiant in her wedding dress, I realized just how much I had done to make her dreams come true. It was her day, her dream wedding, and I was overjoyed to see her so happy. I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This was the culmination of all the sacrifices I'd made for her over the years. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had planned something far beyond this day. For months, I had been working in silence, not telling anyone about my plans. The wedding was only a small part of the surprise I had waiting for her. I had spent years putting away small amounts of money, sacrificing this and that, just so I could make sure her wedding was the most perfect day of her life. But I wasn't done yet. The wedding was only the beginning. I wanted to give her more than just a celebration. I wanted to give her a future, a memory that would last a lifetime, something that would let her know how much she meant to me. And I had done it. In secret, I had planned the most luxurious honeymoon I could afford. I knew how hard she had worked alongside her new husband, how they had struggled to get everything ready for this day. I knew they needed time to unwind, to relax, and to enjoy each other's company without any worries. I had arranged everything, an extravagant trip to a paradise far away, with all the luxury anyone could imagine. I knew this would be the perfect gift for them, one that would not only surprise them but leave them speechless. As the wedding ceremony ended, I stood quietly at the back, watching my daughter laugh and dance with her new husband. They were so in love, so happy. I couldn't help but feel a knot form in my stomach. I didn't want to interrupt their joy, but there was something I needed to tell her. I wanted her to know about the honeymoon, to see her reaction when she realized what I had done for her. But something held me back. There was a part of me that feared her reaction. I had worked so hard to keep this a secret, and I wasn't sure how she would feel about it. Was it too much? Would she feel guilty or uncomfortable with such an extravagant gift? The last thing I wanted was for her to feel like I had overstepped. The more I watched her dance, the more anxious I became. I could see how happy she was, but I also knew that she had no idea about the surprise I was about to reveal. I had waited until the wedding was over to tell her, thinking that would be the best time. She was already so busy with everything that I didn't want to add to her stress. I smiled to myself as I realized that for once, I was going to be the one giving, not just to meet a need or take care of an emergency, but to offer her something grand and unforgettable. She had always dreamed of a perfect wedding, but I wanted her to know that I would go to any length to make her dreams come true. The woman she had become, the life she had built, was everything I had hoped for her. I wanted her to have the best, and I couldn't wait to see her reaction when she found out that the wedding wasn't all I had planned for her. It was just the beginning of the life I had secretly built for her, something she could enjoy far beyond her wedding day. As I watched her laugh and spin in her wedding dress, I couldn't help but wonder if she'd ever truly understand just how much I loved her, how much I had sacrificed, and how far I would go to make her happy. The reception was in full swing, with guests enjoying the delicious food and music. Laughter filled the air, but all I could think about was how I was going to tell my daughter about the honeymoon. She had been so focused on the wedding, and I could tell she hadn't yet realized that the surprises weren't over. I took a moment to step aside, quietly watching her from across the room. My heart swelled with pride as I watched her interact with her friends and family. She was so beautiful, so happy, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing from this perfect day. It wasn't enough for me just to watch her smile. I wanted her to know that I saw her. I wanted her to understand that her happiness had been my top priority for so many years. The wedding was just one part of a much bigger picture. I had worked hard to make sure everything was perfect, but the real joy, the real gift would come when she saw what I had planned for her and her new husband. I tried to shake off my nerves, but they lingered. This was it, the moment I would finally reveal what I had done for her. It was going to be big, a gift that would leave her speechless. I had no doubt that she'd love it, but the fear of her not fully understanding the depth of my love made me hesitate. I wanted her to know that this wasn't about just spending money. This was about giving her a memory, a once-in-a-lifetime experience that would mark the beginning of her new life with her husband. I took a deep breath and walked over to where she was standing, surrounded by guests. She saw me approach and smiled warmly, her eyes sparkling with the joy of the day. My heart ached as I thought of how much I had given to make this day perfect for her. She had always wanted the fairy tale wedding, and today she had gotten it. But there was more. I had something bigger in store. I wanted to share this moment with her, but part of me still feared that the weight of the surprise might be overwhelming. As I stood in front of her, I could see the excitement in her eyes, and for a brief moment, I wondered if she could tell I had something special to reveal. I had waited so long for this moment, and now, finally, it was here. Before I could say a word, she pulled me into a hug, thanking me for everything I had done. "Mom, this has been perfect," she whispered. "Everything is just perfect." I smiled, but my thoughts were already racing. The moment was slipping by, and I couldn't wait any longer. "Sweetheart," I began, my voice trembling just slightly, "I have something else for you. Something I've been planning for months." Her eyes widened with curiosity, and I felt a knot tighten in my chest. "What is it, Mom?" she asked eagerly, her voice full of excitement. I smiled softly, holding back the tears that threatened to spill. "I've arranged for you and your husband to go on a honeymoon, but not just any honeymoon. I wanted to give you something more than just a getaway. I've planned a luxury experience, something you both will never forget." Her face lit up with surprise, her mouth opening in shock. "Wait, what? You planned our honeymoon?" She couldn't seem to process what I was saying. "Mom, you didn't have to do that." But I could see it in her eyes, the hesitation, the doubt. She wasn't sure how to react, and I could tell that my surprise was bigger than she had imagined. "I know you didn't ask for it," I continued, "but I wanted to give you this. After all the work, all the stress you've been through, I want you both to have the time of your lives." For a moment she just stood there, silent. I could see the wheels turning in her head, and I began to wonder if I had gone too far. Would she appreciate this gift, or would she feel guilty? I couldn't read her face, but my heart raced as I waited for her response. Finally, she blinked, her voice softening. "Mom, this is amazing, but are you sure? This is so much. I don't want to feel like we're asking too much from you." I shook my head gently, brushing away the worries that clouded her mind. "Sweetheart, I want to do this. You've given me so much joy today, and I want to give you something special in return. You deserve this." She stood there for a moment longer, her eyes softening. Slowly, I saw her guard come down, and I knew in that moment that she understood. This wasn't about money. It was about love. This was my way of saying that no matter what, she would always have my support. As the evening continued, I could see the realization start to settle in. My daughter, still in shock from my revelation, smiled at me, her eyes full of gratitude. But there was still a trace of hesitation, a part of her unsure whether this was too much. I could understand her confusion. We had never lived a life of luxury, not in the way that most people would think. I had always been careful with money, working hard to make ends meet, but never indulging in anything extravagant. For her, this lavish gift might feel like stepping into a world she had never known, and maybe that was what made it hard for her to accept. She took a step back and looked at her new husband, who was chatting with some friends across the room. I could tell from the look on her face that she was trying to figure out how to explain this to him. They had worked so hard to get to this point, and now they were about to be handed something that, in her eyes, might feel like an overwhelming blessing. They had always been practical people, focused on building a future without relying on handouts. This honeymoon was more than just a trip. It was my way of showing them that no matter how difficult things had been, there was always a way to make dreams come true. "Mom," she said after a long pause, still processing everything, "I don't know what to say. This is so much. I mean, I've always wanted something like this, but I didn't think it would ever be possible. Are you sure? I mean, you really don't have to do this." I could see the struggle in her eyes, the guilt, perhaps. It was a feeling I knew all too well. When you're given something so incredible, it's hard to accept without feeling like you owe more than you can give in return. But this wasn't about obligation. It was about love. I had worked for years, scrimping and saving, cutting corners here and there just so I could provide her with this one thing, something that would make her feel special, that would remind her of the support and love I had always tried to give her. "Sweetheart, you've always been so strong, so independent," I said softly. "And I'm proud of everything you've done, but I want you to know that sometimes it's okay to accept help. It's okay to let someone else give you something beautiful, something you deserve. This is my gift to you, no strings attached. I want you both to have a honeymoon that's just as perfect as this wedding, a time to escape everything and just enjoy each other." Her face softened, but there was still a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "But what about you, Mom? What about the sacrifices you've made? I don't want to put you in a position where you feel like you've given too much." I smiled gently. "I've made my peace with that, darling. I've spent years making sure you were happy, and I'll spend the rest of my life doing the same. But now it's your turn to experience something incredible. I know you'll both make memories that will last forever." For a moment, she just stood there, absorbing my words. Then, slowly, I saw the walls she had built around herself begin to crumble. She stepped forward and took my hand in hers. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't think I can ever truly repay you for everything you've done for me. I love you." And just like that, all the doubts faded away. I saw the warmth in her eyes, the acceptance, and the understanding that this wasn't about me giving too much. It was about the bond between us, the years of love and sacrifice that had brought us to this point. She didn't need to repay me. The joy I saw in her face was enough. I hugged her tightly, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when she truly understood the depth of my love and the reason behind everything I had done. She wasn't just my daughter, she was a part of me, and I would always find a way to make her dreams come true, no matter the cost. As I held her, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace settle in my chest. It wasn't just about the wedding or the honeymoon. It was about knowing that, in the end, I had done everything I could to make sure my daughter felt loved, supported, and cherished. As the evening wore on, the music played and guests laughed, but my mind kept drifting back to the surprise I had planned for my daughter. The honeymoon wasn't just a luxury trip. It was my way of telling her that after all the years of hard work, all the struggles and the sacrifices I had made for her, I was finally giving her something extraordinary. I wanted her to understand that it wasn't about money, it wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about creating a moment for her and her new husband that would forever be etched in their memories. But as the night continued, I could see her trying to come to terms with the idea. She had always been a practical girl, cautious and thoughtful, not one to want to rely on others or accept what felt like too much. I could see it in her eyes as she looked around at the extravagant decorations, the lavish spread of food, and the beautiful gown she wore. She was overwhelmed. She had dreamed of a day like this, but I could tell it was more than she had expected. And now, this honeymoon, this grand gesture was too much for her to fully embrace. I knew her well enough to understand her hesitation. She had always been the kind to take care of herself, to make sure she never asked for too much, never took more than she felt was necessary, but I wasn't asking for anything in return. I had spent years trying to give her the best life I could, trying to make up for everything I thought I had failed to give her. But this was different. This wasn't about making up for something. It was about creating a moment of pure joy for her, something she would never forget. I caught her again across the room, now talking with her husband. They looked so happy, and for a second I almost regretted that I hadn't told her sooner, so she could have shared in that joy sooner. But I had waited. I wanted her to have time to process the wedding, to soak in the beauty of the day, and then I would give her this final gift. I walked over to where they were standing, my heart racing. Her husband, a kind and good-hearted man, saw me first. He smiled warmly at me, his face full of gratitude. He was always so appreciative of everything, and I could tell he was still in awe of the whole wedding. I hadn't seen him this happy since their engagement, but I could also see the concern in his eyes as he noticed the nervousness in mine. I could tell he was waiting for the moment when I would share this secret with them both. "Mom," my daughter said, turning to me with a soft smile, "I've been thinking. I know you've already done so much for us today, but this honeymoon, it's just so much. I don't even know how to accept it." Her words were like a punch in the gut. I knew this moment would come, but hearing it from her still stung. I hadn't expected this kind of hesitation. I had spent so much time planning everything down to the smallest detail, and here she was, still unsure whether to take the next step. But I also knew that she didn't want to disappoint me. She wanted to say thank you, but at the same time, she was still trying to reconcile the gift I was giving with the life she had always known. I placed a hand on her shoulder, looking into her eyes. "Sweetheart, I don't want you to feel guilty. This isn't about what you owe me. This is a gift, and I want you both to have it. I want you to have a chance to relax and just be happy without worrying about anything else. You deserve this more than anyone." Her husband nodded in agreement. "We've always appreciated everything you've done for us, but I think what your mom is saying is that you don't have to worry. We've worked hard for this moment, and we want to enjoy it fully. This honeymoon will be an experience, something special, and it will be our way of showing you how much we appreciate everything." There it was, the reassurance I needed. I had been so worried that my daughter wouldn't accept the gift because it felt too extravagant, but hearing her husband speak so honestly made everything clearer. This wasn't about guilt or obligation. It was about love, about recognizing the efforts of those who had helped us along the way. My daughter's expression softened, and I could see the weight lifting from her shoulders. "I guess it just feels like too much sometimes," she admitted, "but I understand, and I'll take it. We'll take it, because you've always been there for us." I smiled, my heart swelling with emotion. "I just want you to have the best, darling. I want you both to go on this honeymoon and forget about everything else. Just enjoy each other and make memories that will last a lifetime." And in that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. I had given her a gift that wasn't about showing off or seeking praise. It was about giving her the chance to live a dream she hadn't thought was possible. And as she smiled at me, that overwhelming sense of love and gratitude settled in my heart. I had done everything I could to ensure her happiness. As the night wore on, I watched my daughter, her face now glowing with a different kind of joy. The initial hesitation had faded, replaced by a sense of acceptance. I could see the warmth in her eyes as she began to share her excitement with those around her. The wedding was a whirlwind, and now the honeymoon surprise had added an unexpected but wonderful layer to everything. I felt a sense of peace wash over me, knowing that she was finally embracing the gift I had given her. But as much as I watched her celebrate, there was a lingering feeling inside me, a quiet thought that kept creeping into my mind. What if she didn't fully understand why I did it? What if deep down, she thought it was just a way for me to show off, to prove that I could give her everything she wanted? That thought lingered, though I quickly pushed it aside. This wasn't about showing her how much I could afford. It was about showing her how much she meant to me. I had worked so hard for this moment, for her to see that love wasn't always about grand gestures, but sometimes it was about giving freely, without expectation. She had always been so independent, so used to taking care of herself and not asking for help. And now, here I was, giving her a gift that she had never asked for, something so extravagant that it almost felt like too much. But I couldn't help myself. I wanted her to have the life she had dreamed of, to experience the things I could never give her when she was younger. As the reception continued, I saw her laugh and talk with her new husband, her face full of joy and wonder. They were planning their life together, ready to take on whatever came next. I watched them from afar, my heart swelling with pride. I had given them this day, this happiness, and it felt like the world was finally right. But then I noticed something. It wasn't just the happiness in her eyes that I was seeing. It was something more, something deeper. As she spoke with her friends and family, I could tell she was beginning to process everything. She wasn't just grateful for the wedding or the honeymoon. She was beginning to understand the depth of my love for her. I saw it in the way she spoke about the gift I had given, the way she shared her thoughts with others. It was as if she was realizing that this wasn't just about a trip to a fancy resort. It was about her mother's sacrifice, her mother's love, and the years of effort that had gone into creating this perfect moment. I didn't expect her to fully grasp everything right away. It wasn't the kind of thing you could just explain. It was something that had to be felt, something that would only truly be understood once she experienced the joy I had worked so hard to give her. And as the night wore on, I could see that she was beginning to feel that. My heart swelled with pride and relief. It wasn't about the money I had spent. It was about showing her that love had no limits, that no matter how much I had, no matter how small or large the gesture, it was all for her. For the happiness of my daughter, I would do anything. And I knew that no matter what, this honeymoon would be a memory they would cherish forever. Later that evening, as the celebration began to wind down, she found me again. Her face was glowing, her happiness unmistakable, but there was something else in her eyes now, something deeper, something that spoke to the connection we had always shared. "Mom," she said softly, taking my hand, "I don't know how to thank you. I keep thinking about everything you've done for me. This wedding, this honeymoon, I don't think I'll ever be able to repay you." I smiled, gently squeezing her hand. "Sweetheart, you don't have to repay me for anything. Seeing you this happy, knowing that you have the life you've always dreamed of is enough for me." She looked down for a moment, her voice barely a whisper. "I know, I feel like I didn't realize how much you sacrificed, how much you gave up just to make sure I had everything I needed. I can't believe how much love you've poured into me all these years." My heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when she finally understood the depth of my love for her. It wasn't just about the big things. It was about the little things, the late nights, the sacrifices, the decisions made out of love. It was all for her, and now she was beginning to see it. "You don't need to thank me, darling," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I did it because you are worth it. You always have been." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I love you, Mom," she whispered. And in that moment, I knew she truly understood. It wasn't just about the honeymoon or the wedding. It was about the bond we shared. The love between us was stronger than anything material, and I realized then that this was the greatest gift of all. The night finally came to an end, but it felt like the beginning of something new. My daughter and her husband were whisked away to their hotel suite for the night, their faces still bright with the joy of the wedding. I stayed behind, watching them from a distance, my heart full. The wedding had been everything she had hoped for, and now the honeymoon I had secretly planned would give them a chance to bask in the love they had just promised each other forever. But as the last of the guests left, I found myself standing alone in the quiet of the reception hall. I wasn't sad, far from it, but a quiet thought lingered in the back of my mind. Had I made the right decision by not telling her sooner about the honeymoon? I had carefully orchestrated every detail, every part of the surprise, but now I wondered if I had placed too much on her shoulders. She had never been the type to accept grand gestures easily, and the last thing I wanted was for her to feel overwhelmed by it all. Yet, when I saw the happiness in her eyes earlier, the doubts began to fade away. She had accepted it. She had embraced it. The days leading up to the wedding had been a whirlwind, and I had hardly stopped to catch my breath. But now that the celebration was over, I found myself reflecting on everything. The wedding was beautiful, of course, but the real reason for the joy I felt wasn't in the decorations, the food, or the flowers. It was in seeing her so happy, seeing the love between her and her new husband. That's what mattered most. And it was that love that had driven me to give her this last surprise, this honeymoon that would allow them both to experience the world in a way they never had before. I was sitting alone in my hotel room, a glass of wine in hand, when I finally allowed myself to think back on the years of sacrifices I had made for her. I remembered the late nights I had spent working overtime, the days I had skipped meals just to make sure I could save enough to buy her that perfect wedding dress, the times I put aside my own dreams to make sure hers came true. I had given so much of myself over the years, but I never once regretted any of it. Every choice, every sacrifice was worth it to see her happy, to see her living the life she deserved. But what struck me in that quiet moment was the realization that I had never truly told her everything. There had always been a part of me that held back, a part that kept my own struggles hidden, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't want her to feel burdened. I didn't want her to know how hard it had been, how many nights I had spent worrying about how I would make it all work. I had worked in the background, making sure everything fell into place, and I wanted her to feel like she had been given a perfect life. She deserved that. But now, as I sat there alone, I wondered if she would ever truly understand the weight of what I had done for her. Would she ever fully grasp the depth of my love? I had made so many sacrifices to give her this life, but there was always the fear that she would never see it. She had been so independent, so determined to carve her own path, and that had made me proud. But as I watched her with her new husband, I realized just how much she had grown. She wasn't the little girl who needed constant guidance. She was an adult, capable, and strong. Still, I couldn't help but wish that just for once, she would understand the sacrifices I had made, the quiet battles I had fought to give her everything she wanted. But then I saw her with her husband, laughing and talking about their future. They were excited about the honeymoon, about starting their life together, and I realized something. She didn't need to know every detail of my struggles. She didn't need to see the late-night hours I spent worrying or the small sacrifices I had made along the way. What mattered was that I had given her the foundation she needed to be happy, to build her own life, her own dreams. She had a future now, a future filled with love, security, and possibility. That night, I finally felt at peace. I didn't need her to understand everything I had done. All I needed was to know that she was happy, that she had everything she needed to succeed. And as the night came to an end, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The wedding was perfect. The honeymoon was set. And most importantly, my daughter knew that I had always been there for her, and that was all I had ever wanted. The days following the wedding felt like a blur. My daughter and her new husband left for their honeymoon, and I couldn't help but smile as I imagined them experiencing the luxury and relaxation I had planned for them. I had always dreamed of giving her something special, but I never imagined I could give her something as grand as this. I couldn't wait for them to return, to hear the stories of their adventures, to see how this gift had affected their relationship and how it had created a memory they would cherish for the rest of their lives. But as much as I was looking forward to their return, there was a part of me that couldn't fully shake the feeling of uncertainty. I kept thinking about the conversation we had before they left. She had seemed so unsure, so hesitant about the whole thing, and I began to wonder if I had done the right thing by planning such an extravagant gift for her. Was it too much? Was it too overwhelming? I knew she was grateful, of course, but sometimes I couldn't help but worry. I had spent so many years being the one to provide for her, to make sure she never had to ask for anything, but in doing so, I had never really stopped to consider how she might feel about all of it. I had always kept my struggles hidden from her, always made sure that she never felt burdened by my own challenges. But now, as I sat in the quiet of my home, I wondered if that had been the right approach. Had I kept too much from her? Had I placed too much on her shoulders, expecting her to understand the sacrifices I had made for her? I thought back to the wedding day, her smile, her laughter, the way she had looked at her new husband. She had been so happy. I realized then that the worries that had been swirling in my mind were nothing more than doubts. My daughter was grown now, and she was perfectly capable of understanding love in her own way. She didn't need to know the ins and outs of my sacrifices to appreciate the life I had given her. What mattered was that she felt loved and supported, and I knew that she did. I smiled to myself as I thought about how different life would be for her now. She was starting a new chapter with her husband, and I was proud of the woman she had become. I knew that no matter what, she would always carry the lessons I had taught her with her: love, sacrifice, and the importance of never giving up, no matter how difficult things got. The days seemed to pass slowly while they were away, but when they finally returned, my heart leapt in my chest. My daughter called me the moment they got back, her voice full of excitement. "Mom, you won't believe how amazing everything was. The honeymoon was everything we could have dreamed of and more. It felt like a dream," she said. Her words filled me with warmth. "I'm so glad you enjoyed it, sweetheart," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "You deserve it." I could hear her smile through the phone. "I don't know how to thank you for this, Mom. It was truly incredible. You've given us more than we could ever have imagined. We'll remember this forever." As she spoke, I realized that despite all my doubts, everything had worked out perfectly. She was happy, and that's all I had ever wanted. The honeymoon wasn't just about luxury or the stunning destination. It was about the experience they had shared, the time they had taken to reconnect with each other, away from the stresses of the world. And now, as they returned to reality, I knew that this memory would stay with them forever. This was my gift to them, not just a trip, but the reminder of the love and effort that had gone into their new life. A few days after their return, I visited my daughter and her husband at their home. They were still basking in the afterglow of their honeymoon, their faces filled with excitement as they recounted every detail of their travels. It made my heart swell to hear how much they had enjoyed themselves, but what struck me most was the change I saw in my daughter. There was a new light in her eyes, a new sense of gratitude and awareness that hadn't been there before. She had always been grateful, of course, but now I could see that she truly understood the depth of everything I had done for her. "Mom," she said, pulling me into a hug as soon as I arrived, "I don't think I can ever truly thank you for everything. This honeymoon, it was beyond anything we ever expected. I keep thinking about how much you must have sacrificed just to give us this." I smiled softly, feeling a lump form in my throat. "You don't need to thank me, darling. I did it because I love you, and I wanted you to have the very best. You deserve all the happiness in the world." She looked at me with a mixture of awe and understanding. "I know, Mom, I really do. I don't think I fully understood before just how much you've always done for me. You've always been there, no matter what. I I feel like I've never truly thanked you for all of it." My heart swelled with emotion as I looked into her eyes. "You've always thanked me in your own way, sweetheart. Seeing you happy is all the thanks I'll ever need." Her husband nodded in agreement, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "We couldn't have asked for a better mother-in-law," he said. "You've made all of this possible. We'll never forget it." I didn't need any grand gestures or grandiose speeches. Their words were enough. I had given them a dream wedding and an unforgettable honeymoon, but the true reward for me was seeing them both so happy, so full of love. They didn't need to repay me. I had already received the greatest gift, the knowledge that I had raised my daughter well and that she understood the love behind every sacrifice I had made for her. It was a feeling that no amount of money, no grand gesture could ever match. And so, as I stood there, surrounded by my daughter and her new husband, I knew that everything had come full circle. The wedding, the honeymoon, the sacrifices, all of it had been worth it. Because in the end, love was the only thing that truly mattered. The days following my visit to their home were filled with quiet reflection. I had spent so many years making sure my daughter had everything she needed, always prioritizing her over myself, that I never really allowed myself the time to stop and think about my own life. But now, watching her with her husband, seeing how happy they were, and hearing her gratitude for the things I had given her, it made me feel at peace. It was like all those years of struggle and sacrifice had led to this moment, and now I could finally let go of some of the worries that had been weighing me down. I had always been the kind of mother who put my daughter's needs before my own, never really allowing myself to take center stage. My life had revolved around her, and I had no regrets about it. But seeing her grow into the woman she had become, and knowing that I had been the one to help shape her, filled me with a deep sense of pride. I had given her the tools to live her life with love, kindness, and independence. Now she was beginning to fully appreciate those lessons in ways she hadn't before. I spent the following weeks checking in on her, hearing more about her experiences during the honeymoon, and enjoying the small moments of connection we had. Each conversation made me feel more certain that I had done the right thing by giving her that dream wedding and the luxurious honeymoon. It wasn't just about the material things, it was about the love and support I had given her her entire life, and seeing her embrace that love with such grace made everything worth it. But despite the happiness that surrounded us, I couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness creeping in at the edges. It wasn't a sadness, but rather a realization that my role in her life was shifting. She was no longer the little girl I had cared for, the child who relied on me for everything. Now she had her own life, her own future to build, and I was no longer needed in the same way. I had spent so much time being her everything, and now, as she stood at the threshold of her new life, I had to figure out where I fit in. I didn't want to lose her, but I also knew that I couldn't hold on to her forever. And so, I began to think about what my future would look like now. What would my life be like when she had fully settled into her new life with her husband? What would I do with all the time I had spent giving to her? These questions felt strange to me at first, but as the days passed, they became more real. I didn't want to be left behind, forgotten, but I also knew that my daughter needed the space to grow on her own. As I sat in the quiet of my home, the realization hit me more forcefully than before. I had been living my life for my daughter, always focusing on her happiness, and now, for the first time, I felt a little lost. The space she had once filled in my life was now empty, and I wasn't sure how to fill it. I had spent years living with a sense of purpose, being her provider, her protector, the one she could always turn to. But now she had a husband to lean on, and she was carving her own path. It was what every parent hoped for, of course. You wanted your children to grow up, to become independent, and to build their own futures. But it was harder than I had anticipated. The quiet house felt foreign, the silence a stark reminder that things had changed. I tried to keep myself busy, throwing myself into activities I had put off over the years. I started taking classes, something I had always wanted to do but never had the time for. I began to travel a bit, seeing places I had always dreamed of visiting. And slowly, I started to realize that this new chapter of my life wasn't something to be feared. It was an opportunity for me to find joy in the things I had neglected for so long. I hadn't realized how much of myself I had sacrificed over the years, not just for my daughter, but also for the idea of being the perfect mother. But now I had the chance to rediscover who I was outside of that role. I could take my time, enjoy the little things, and start building a life that was just for me. Yet, even as I embraced this new beginning, there was still a part of me that longed to be more involved in my daughter's life. I had given her everything I could, and now I wanted to make sure I didn't fade into the background. I wanted to be there for her as she embarked on this new phase of her life, but I also needed to respect her independence. One afternoon, I received a call from her. Her voice was warm, familiar, and full of excitement. "Mom," she said, "I've been thinking. We're planning a trip next year, and we'd love for you to join us. We're going to spend some time exploring Europe, and I want you to be a part of it." My heart soared at her invitation. It wasn't just about the trip, it was about the gesture, the recognition that I still had a place in her life, even though she was now starting her own family. It was her way of saying that I wasn't being left behind, that I was still an important part of her world. "I'd love to," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'd love to be there with you." And in that moment, I realized that even though my role had changed, it didn't mean I had to let go completely. I would always be her mother, and no matter how much time passed or how far she went in her life, she would always be a part of mine. We were still connected, still bound by the love that had defined our relationship from the very beginning. As I prepared for the trip, I felt a sense of peace settle in my heart. My daughter had grown up, and I was proud of the woman she had become, but I was also excited for this next chapter, the one where I could step into my own life while still being there for her. This was the balance I had been searching for, a life of my own and a love that would never fade. As the weeks passed and I continued to embrace my newfound freedom, the upcoming trip to Europe became something I eagerly looked forward to. It was as if the invitation from my daughter had opened up a new chapter for both of us. While she and her husband were busy planning their future, I was planning a future of my own. I realized how much I had been holding back from life, thinking that my purpose was solely tied to raising my daughter. But now, as I prepared for a journey with her, I saw that there was still so much of the world for me to explore, so much of myself left to rediscover. I began to take more time for myself, finding joy in the small things that I had once overlooked. I spent afternoons painting, something I had always loved but never had the time to pursue. I took long walks in the park, letting the fresh air fill my lungs, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. My daughter's wedding had been the culmination of so many years of work, but now I was starting to see that there was more to life than just giving. There was living too, living for myself, for my own happiness and fulfillment. But as the trip neared, I found myself feeling a bit anxious. It had been so long since I had traveled, and the thought of stepping into the unknown, even with my daughter by my side, was a bit daunting. Would I still feel connected to her, even though she was now married? Would this trip bring us closer, or would it remind me of how much her life had changed? I thought back to when she was a child, to the long nights I spent worrying about her future, about making sure she was happy, safe, and loved. I had given up so much of myself for her, and though I had no regrets, I now realized that the life I had put on hold for so many years was waiting for me to embrace it. I didn't need to be needed in the same way anymore. My daughter was married and she had her own life to live, but that didn't mean my role as her mother had diminished. It had simply evolved. The closer the trip came, the more excited I became. I couldn't wait to see my daughter in a new light, this time not just as my child, but as a woman who was creating her own future. I wanted to hear about her experiences, her dreams for the future with her husband, and how she saw herself in the world. I had always been the one offering advice, guidance, and support, but now I was excited to listen, to understand her new perspective, and to share in the adventures she was about to embark on. The day of the trip arrived, and as I boarded the plane with my daughter and her husband, I felt a mix of emotions. There was the familiar joy of being with her, of sharing in her happiness, but there was also a sense of bittersweet nostalgia. We were no longer just a mother and daughter. She had her own life, her own family now. Yet, as we traveled together, I felt a sense of closeness that reminded me of the early days of motherhood, when it was just the two of us against the world. As we arrived in Europe and started our journey, I found myself overwhelmed with gratitude. The beauty of the cities, the history that surrounded us, and most of all, the laughter and joy we shared as a family, it all felt like a dream. I had worked so hard for so many years, putting my own dreams on hold to make sure she had the best possible life. Now, seeing her live her own dream, I realized that everything I had done had led to this moment. We visited beautiful landmarks, wandered through cobblestone streets, and enjoyed meals at quaint cafes. Each day was an adventure, and as we shared these experiences, I began to see my daughter in a new light. She was no longer the little girl I had raised, but a woman in her own right, independent, strong, and confident. It was hard to let go of the idea that I had always been the one holding everything together, but seeing her so happy and fulfilled made me realize that I had done my job. She was ready to live her life, and I could now take my step back, knowing she was in good hands. One evening, as we sat outside a cafe overlooking a beautiful plaza, my daughter turned to me. "Mom, thank you for everything, for the wedding, the honeymoon, everything," she said. "I never truly understood what it meant to give so much of yourself until now. I see it now, Mom, and I don't think I'll ever be able to repay you for the love you've given me." I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes as I looked at her. "Sweetheart, you don't need to repay me for anything. Watching you find happiness, watching you build your life with your husband, that's enough for me." Her husband, who had been quiet up until that moment, added, "We're grateful for everything you've done. You've made so many things possible for us and we'll never forget it." In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of a foreign city, with my daughter and her husband beside me, I finally felt like I could let go. I had given them all I could, and now it was time for them to live their own life, to build their own future. And as I looked at my daughter, I knew that no matter where life took us, our bond would always remain. It had evolved, it had changed, but it would always be there, stronger than ever. As the days in Europe passed, I began to truly absorb the weight of the change that had taken place in my life. The trip was everything I had hoped it would be: beautiful, adventurous, and full of unforgettable moments. But there was something more that was happening in me as I spent these days with my daughter and her husband. I realized that in all the years of raising her, in all the years of sacrifice and love, I had never allowed myself the space to think about my own happiness, my own desires. Now, with each step through the cobblestone streets of Paris, each sip of coffee in Venice, and each conversation shared with my daughter, I was beginning to reconnect with parts of myself that I had long forgotten. I wasn't just her mother anymore. I was a woman in her own right, with dreams and desires beyond my role as a parent. The sense of freedom was both exciting and a little daunting, but what made it even more beautiful was the realization that I was not losing my daughter. She was not slipping away into her new life with her husband. Instead, we were growing together, evolving. This trip was a bridge between the mother I had been and the woman I was becoming. The bond between us had shifted, yes, but it was still there, and it was just as strong as ever. It wasn't about being needed in the same way anymore. It was about being present, supporting her as she carved her own path, and also allowing myself to be fully present in my own life. On the last night of our trip, as we sat by the water in a small town near the coast, my daughter leaned in and said, "Mom, I've been thinking. This trip has made me realize just how much I've taken for granted. All the years you spent making sure I was happy, all the things you sacrificed for me, I didn't really understand it until now. I hope one day I can do for you what you've done for me." I looked at her, a smile tugging at the corners of my lips. "Sweetheart, you've already done it," I said. "Watching you live the life you've dreamed of, seeing you so happy, that's the greatest gift I could ever ask for. You've made me proud, and I've already received all the thanks I need." Her husband nodded. "We both know you're the reason we are where we are today, and we'll never forget that." It was in that moment, watching my daughter and her husband so content, that I fully understood how much my love had shaped their lives. I didn't need anything in return because the joy I had given them and the joy they gave me was more than enough. I had always given for them, but now I realized it was time to start giving to myself too. The future felt open and bright, and for the first time I was truly excited about what was to come. As the plane touched down back home, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. The trip had been everything I had needed it to be. It had given me a deeper understanding of my daughter's life and a greater appreciation for my own. We had spent so many years in this dance of mother and daughter, where I gave everything I had and she received, and now I could see how our relationship had transformed. It wasn't about one person giving or one person taking anymore. It was about sharing, about supporting each other in different ways as we both move forward in our lives. As we returned to our everyday routines, I found myself looking at the world with fresh eyes. The quiet mornings, the simple evenings, I began to enjoy them in a way I never had before. I realized that the world was still full of possibilities for me, and while I would always be a mother, I could also be something more. I had dreams, I had passions, and it was time to nurture those too. One evening, as I sat in my living room, a book in hand and a cup of tea beside me, I felt a peaceful satisfaction that I hadn't known in years. I wasn't waiting for the next big moment. I wasn't looking ahead to what needed to be done for my daughter or what sacrifices I still needed to make. I was just living. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about it. A few days later, my daughter called again. She and her husband were planning another small getaway, this time just the two of them, and she wanted to know if I would like to join them again in a few months for another adventure. "Mom," she said, her voice full of excitement, "we're planning a weekend retreat at the lake. I think it would be so great if you could come with us again." I smiled as I listened to her. "Of course, sweetheart, I'd love to join you. It sounds perfect." And in that moment, I realized that while my role as a mother had changed, my place in her life would never be taken away. It was evolving into something new, something even more beautiful. I would always be there for her, just as she would always be there for me. The next chapter of our lives was waiting, and I was ready to embrace it, not just as her mother, but as a woman who was finally learning to live for herself too. And with that, I knew I had given my daughter all I ever could. She was happy, independent, and had a loving husband by her side. Now it was time for me to carve out my own happiness alongside the love we shared. This was just the beginning of the rest of my life. As the months went by, I continued to find joy in the small moments. I took up new hobbies, learning to paint landscapes, something I had always dreamed of doing but never had the time for. I enrolled in a pottery class, letting the smooth clay run through my fingers, shaping it into something beautiful. I even started volunteering at a local charity, offering my time and support to causes that were close to my heart. It felt liberating, like I was rediscovering parts of myself that had long been buried beneath the weight of motherhood. The trips with my daughter and her husband became a regular part of my life. We spent weekends exploring nearby towns, hiking in the mountains, and enjoying the peace of nature. These moments allowed me to reconnect with her, not just as her mother, but as a friend. I could see how much she was thriving in her marriage, how strong and confident she had become, and I was so proud of her, more than I had ever imagined I would be. But with each passing day, I realized that the greatest gift I had given her wasn't the dream wedding, the luxury honeymoon, or the sacrifices I had made for her. It was the space to live her life freely, to grow into the woman she was always meant to be. And in return, she had given me something I hadn't expected, a chance to live for myself, to pursue my own happiness, to carve out my own future, and to be more than just a mother. It was a beautiful cycle, a balance between giving and receiving, between loving and being loved. I no longer felt like I was just a caretaker, or that my identity was tied solely to my role as a mother. I was rediscovering who I was outside of that role, and it felt like a breath of fresh air. One quiet afternoon, as I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, I received a message from my daughter. It was a picture of her and her husband, standing on a beach at sunset, their faces glowing with happiness. The caption read, "Thank you for everything, Mom. We love you more than words can say." I sat back, tears welling up in my eyes. In that simple photo, in those few words, I knew that I had given her the tools to build the life she had always wanted. And in return, she had given me the gift of letting go, of allowing me to live my own life, to embrace the future with open arms. Years passed, and my life continued to unfold in beautiful, unexpected ways. My daughter and her husband had settled into a life filled with love, laughter, and adventure. They had built a home together, and though they were far away, I knew that they carried a piece of me with them always. They would call, visit, and keep me updated on their latest adventures, but there was no longer any pressure for me to be the one who gave them everything. I had given them the foundation they needed, and now they were living their own story. As for me, I had finally come to understand that life doesn't have to be about holding on to what you've given. It's about giving with love and grace, then allowing the people you love to live their own lives, to take the lessons you've taught them and build something new. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch of my new home by the lake, I watched the sun dip below the horizon, casting beautiful colors across the sky. The quiet peace of the moment settled in my heart, and I realized that I was exactly where I was meant to be. My daughter had her life, and I had mine, but both of our lives were still intertwined, rooted in the love and sacrifices that had shaped us both. The phone rang, and I picked it up to hear my daughter's voice on the other end. "Mom," she said, her voice warm with excitement, "I've been thinking. We're having a family reunion in the fall. Could you come? We want to spend some time with you. You've given so much to us, and we want to show you how much we appreciate you." I smiled softly. "Of course, sweetheart. I'd love to." As we talked, I realized that the years of sacrifice had led me here, to a place of peace, to a life where love flowed freely, without expectation or obligation. My daughter had grown into the woman I always hoped she would be, and I had finally grown into the woman I always wanted to be. And so, with a heart full of love and gratitude, I embraced this new chapter of my life. The journey of motherhood had been beautiful, and though it had evolved, I was content knowing that my love for my daughter and hers for me would always remain a constant no matter where life took us. This was the life I had built, the life I had dreamed of, a life full of love, fulfillment, and the freedom to be myself. And as I looked toward the future, I knew one thing for sure: it was never too late to start living for yourself, to embrace the freedom and joy that comes from giving yourself the same love you give to others. This was just the beginning of the rest of my life.